Do. Hello and welcome back to Soul Academy. This is episode 2. If you haven't seen episode 1, then perhaps you'd like to go and see episode 1. Might give you some idea as to what this is all about. Today's episode is called Free Your Mind. When I say free your mind, I don't mean it in some vague woo-woo Morpheus versus the Matrix, open your mind sort of way. I'm talking about the liberal arts, the 7 liberal arts that you can see depicted here. So each of these 7 characters represents one of those liberal arts. These days, they might be referred to as the classical liberal arts, because we've added a whole bunch of extra ones. Don't ask me why. But I'm talking about these. Okay. So here they are. The 7 liberal arts are grammar, logic, rhetoric, number, geometry, music, and astronomy. These are divided into the first 3, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which is known as the trivium, and then the final 4 are known as the quadrivium. There are many people walking around with BA degrees, and BA stands for Bachelor of the Arts. And I would be willing to bet that most people in this country with a BA wouldn't be able to tell me what the arts actually are, the arts that are referred to in the A of BA. And it's not your fault if you have a BA and you don't know this. You weren't taught it, and you should have been taught it, really, because I think this is the very first thing about a BA. So, today I'm going to look at the trivium, and the trivium is all about language. The quadrivium refers to the nature of reality, the operations of reality. But the trivium is just about language. The reason why the liberal arts are called the liberal arts is because the word liberal refers to liberation, freedom. And the liberal arts are specifically designed to free the mind of the scholar, to make them unenslavable. It used to be illegal in ancient Rome to teach the liberal arts to slaves, because the Romans knew that if the slaves knew the liberal arts, they would not be able to control the slaves. So, I'm going to take a look at each of the first 3 in the trivium: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And we'll go through them one by one in order. This graphic on the right here, you can see we've got the 3 liberal arts in each of the corners. And we have these words, est and non-est. This is Latin, and it basically means is and is not. So grammar is not logic. Logic is not rhetoric. But grammar is truth, and logic is truth, and so on. So, pardon me. So let's begin with grammar. Grammar is the understanding of language. And it asks the following questions. What did you say? What are you talking about? And what do you mean by that? So this diagram on the right here shows 6 components of grammar. And if we start in the middle and move outwards, we can get a fairly comprehensive overview of what is covered in grammar. So in the middle we have phonetics, and this is about the sounds that we make with our mouths. So b, p, sh, t, z. These are all phonetics. Okay. Then we have phonology, which refers to things called phonemes. And these are the graphical representations of those phonetics. So in our language, in English, and in many other languages, these are letters, and sometimes short combinations of letters like th, sh, and so on. Then we have morphology, which is the study of words. Within this, we have things like definitions and etymology and parts of speech and stuff like that. It's worth mentioning at this point that your understanding of definitions constitutes a very significant part of your perceived personality. So who people think you are is based mostly, I would say, on what you think words mean. It's more about that than it is what you figured out or how you deliver things, how you deliver your speech. I mean, if you consider a word like love a big word, or a word like God, what you think those words mean constitutes a large part of who you are in the eyes of other people around you. So then moving out of the circle, we have syntax. This is the study of phrases and sentences, the ordering of words and things like this. Then we have semantics, which is the literal meaning of a sentence. And then finally, pragmatics, which in this diagram says the meaning in context of discourse. I would say that pragmatics is the intended meaning of a sentence. So if I was to say it's raining cats and dogs, if we were to look at that semantically, then I'm talking about quadrupeds falling out of the sky. But pragmatically, what I'm saying is that, well, it's very weather out there, which is just excellent grammar. It's about to get a whole lot more weather very soon. Okay, so talking about phonetics, the first thing on the inside of this circle here, phonetics. One of these shapes is called a kiki, and the other one is called a bubar. So can you tell me which shape is the kiki and which one is the bubar? I'm going to give you 2 seconds. Your 2 seconds are up. So obviously the kiki is the spiky one on the right and the bubar is the rounded one on the left. And if I was to ask you why, you might say something like, well, the kiki goes kiki, 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 and the bubar goes bubar, bubar, bubar. What's interesting about this is that it doesn't matter what language you speak, unanimously, not entirely unanimously, but the vast majority of people seem to understand that the spiky one is the kiki and the rounded one is the bubar. So why is this important? Well, it turns out that there is an innate understanding of language that relates simply to the sounds that come out of our mouths. We can use this to inform our speech when we're choosing the words, the right words to say. We can choose words that resonate phonetically, words that evoke the kind of imagery that we're trying to communicate. Perhaps we can speak more poetically as well if we take phonetics into account. So that's phonetics. Moving on, I'm going to leave out phonology for now, and I'm going to move over to morphology. So in morphology, we're talking about definitions and etymology. Now, personally, I think etymology is more powerful for understanding than definitions. Yes, definitions are important. We want to know what words mean. But to understand where a word comes from can really affect our worldview. So I've got a few examples of some etymologies here to perhaps illustrate that point. And I'm going to start off with the word bagel. Bagel. So bagel is a Yiddish word, if you didn't know. It's a Jewish word. Perhaps you're not surprised by that. And it comes from this word, Burgel, which is an old German word for bracelet. So you might then infer from this that the word bangle, which we use for a bracelet, also comes from the word burgle. I mean, that's a safe assumption for us to make, right? Well, wrong. The word bangle actually comes from the Hindi bangli, and the relationship between the word bangle and bagel is, in fact, a coincidence. So let me give you another example. Actually, before I do, you might be thinking, okay, but why does that change my worldview in any way? Like, why is that important? Like, why does that really matter? And I will attempt to demonstrate why that matters now. So my next example is the word history. And you may have heard people say that history is a portmanteau. Portmanteau. A portmanteau, or is it portmanteau, is a combination of two words that are put together and they form a new word, like this. And you may have heard that history is a portmanteau of the words his and story, and you put them together and you get the word history. And then it makes a person think something like, well, what about her story? And it makes a person think, well, people throughout history, they've all been sexist, haven't they? It's all just been men controlling women just for the whole of time. It's been the strong arm of men just sorry. It's been the strong arm of man just oppressing women for all of time. And some people just go on the rest of their life just like that, just believing that. Except this etymology is not true. The etymology of the word history comes from the Greek word historia, which means inquiry. It actually has nothing to do with men telling stories. Well, I mean, maybe you could say, well, inquiry was a thing that only men did in ancient Greece. Okay, but I'd say at that point, perhaps a person is attached to their ideas. So, let's have another example. The word government is a portmanteau of the words govern, meaning control, and ment from mental. And you put them together and they form the word government. The word literally means mind control. Except, oh no, wait, actually that one's true. Okay, well anyway, let's move on. So we've gone over a few different components of grammar right there. Here's some recommended reading if you're interested in learning more about grammar. Some introductory reading. I would really recommend the Wooden Books Trivium. Gives you a really great sort of introduction. And if you want to do some more in-depth study, there is The Trivium by Sister Miriam Joseph. That one's pretty hardcore. The old clergy did little but read and write their whole lives and became particularly adept at this stuff, which I would argue is how they were able to acquire so much power. Going back to the trivium, skipping back, I just want to say at this point, if you become even remotely accomplished in these three arts, you will be a formidable force in this planet, on this earth. And think about that. The people that are in power, the powers that be, we're talking about the mayors and the lords and ladies and the kings and queens of this world. If you start to understand the etymologies and the definitions of the words that they're using, you start to become a player in their game. And if you start to become good at logic, at formulating arguments, then you become a threat to their power. And if you become very good at rhetoric as well, which is a kind of delivery of what you've figured out, then you too can become a powerful person. So that's all I'll say about that for now. I'd like to move on to the next liberal art known as logic. So logic was also called dialectic in the past, and it's about mental processing, it's about sense making. Logic is the bringer of reason. Okay, it is a means of creating true sentences, known as conclusions, by combining other sentences known as premises. It refers to the discourse between people. And you might say, well, why do we need reason? And I know that to some people that seems like a ridiculous question. But today, there are people calling for the abolition of reason. Well, put it this way. Imagine somebody came to you and said, you're going to prison now. Do you think maybe you'd ask why? Wouldn't that be like the main thing you wanted to know? If you were put in prison, why did you put me in prison? Well, if you ask the question why, what you're asking for is a reason. So without reason, things can happen for no reason. You can get put in prison for no reason. That's why we need reason, okay? So this is a diagram of all the different kinds of arguments that we can have in logic. When I say argument, I'm not talking about a heated debate and disagreement between two people. That is one definition of the word argument. I'm talking about another definition of the word argument. This is a logical argument. A logical argument is essentially a set of sentences where we can figure something out from just the listed sentences. This may look sort of complex and there's a lot to remember here, but that's okay. I don't expect you to soak all this up right now. I'm just putting this here to show you the complete list of arguments, the different types of arguments that we can have. And you may find this all a bit abstract, but we deal with this every day. We do this every day. When someone says, why did you do that? And they say, oh, well, I did this because of that. You then might try to determine whether or not their reasoning is valid or invalid. If somebody makes a claim and it's not true, then we want to know if something's sound or unsound, for example. Okay. There are only two types of argument in logic. We've got deductive arguments This is where we deduce things with our deduction. So Sherlock Holmes was all about deduction, and this is what detectives do. And this is finding out things to be certainly true. Then we have inductive arguments. This is when we can't know the truth, we try to figure out what's likely and what's unlikely. So inductive arguments we normally make regarding the future, because nobody knows the future. We can't deduce the future, but we can say what's probably going to happen or what's probably not going to happen. And so within inductive arguments, we don't have valid arguments and invalid arguments. We have strong and weak arguments. So we also have these words cogent and uncogent. These are basically sound and unsound, but for inductive arguments instead of deductive arguments. I'm going to do more stuff about logic later on. Please don't be overwhelmed. I'm going to do a little overview of, well, just a couple of examples of some logical arguments, just for demonstration's sake. So on the left here, we've got an example of an argument. We have a premise, we have another premise, and then we make a conclusion. We say therefore, and then we have a conclusion. All right, another example of an argument, one that I quite enjoy. People are from Earth, and Earth is in space, therefore people are from space. So do you think that argument is valid, to start with? And do you think that argument is sound? Okay, so those are my questions to you. Answers in the comments below, please. Okay, next. So moving on to the next liberal art in the trivium, I want to talk about rhetoric. You may have heard the word rhetoric used in politics, and it's generally seen as a bit of a bad thing. People say, oh, we want to cut out all the rhetoric and stuff. And perhaps the word's been demonized somewhat because of that. But really, rhetoric is the art of communication. Perhaps we've entered an era where we should be referring to this particular art as classical rhetoric, maybe. So rhetoric is about the effective delivery of information. So putting things in a way that is persuasive, putting things in a way that is memorable, putting things in a way that makes people think. Okay. Rhetoric is, in part, the art of putting complex things simply. So any old fool can make something simple sound complicated, but it takes rhetoric to make something complicated sound simple. So I'd like you to consider, if you're good at putting things simply to other people, would that not also make you good at putting things simply to yourself? And if it's true that rhetoric is a means of putting things simply to yourself, does that not mean that you literally have a more efficient brain when you have good rhetoric? That less neurons are required in order for you to understand something because you put things more simply, right? I believe that to be true. You can see it, you can look at it like a kind of optimized piece of software where you don't need more brain power if you can put things more simply. You can use what limited brain power you have to greater effect. Okay, so rhetoric, it really is a way of increasing your mental capacity. Okay, so one of the components of rhetoric that I really enjoy and appreciate is this thing known as the 5 canons, and they are the following. So we have invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. So this is about delivering information to other people, just like what I'm doing with you. Okay. So the invention part is when you come up with plausible arguments and supporting material, as it says here. It's doing your research, and it's coming up with a concept of what you want to communicate. Then we have arrangement. So this is the organization, the layout of the information. So in my case, I made a scheme of work, and I've made a sort of menu, and I've thought about which things I'm going to deliver at which times, so that you can gain a better understanding. If I don't arrange things properly, then it's going to become more difficult for you to learn stuff, because maybe I'll give you, I don't know, what's the word? There might be certain pieces of information that depend on other pieces of knowledge. And so I want to give you those dependencies first. Then we have the style. So the style is the way in which I convey the information to you. Is it appropriate for the context? Is it compatible with the people that I'm talking to? So I don't want to talk to you like children, because it will come across patronizing. But at the same time, I don't want to use overly complex language, because that's going to exclude certain people. Really, my style now is just one of just trying to be genuine, just trying to be me. So that's the style of no style. That's Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. Then we've got memory, memoria, it used to be called. And this is, I suppose it's my means of holding all this information within myself, so that I can deliver it to you without having to read from cards or whatever. Okay, because you don't want a teacher to just be reading to you, like you're not going to learn anything. And also, if a person has questions, then memoria, memory, represents a person's preparation for those questions. And if we are to use good rhetoric, then we also need to consider our delivery. So that's the final canon of the 5 canons. Going back to the question and answer thing, so if I've got a good grasp of the material that I'm delivering, and then people are doing a Q&A at the end of a talk, I would say that having good rhetoric in your delivery is to just answer questions plainly and straightly, to not waffle on about an answer. You really just have to, when you're answering questions at the end of a talk, you got to listen to the question, take a bit of time to make sure that you understand what you've been asked, and then answer the question, right? So if somebody says, how much is this going to cost? Then a really good answer would be 10 quid, right? You don't have to go, well, there's this thing and there's that thing, and you don't have to talk for hours. In fact, you shouldn't. Yeah, straight answers to questions. That's a good delivery in my book. So those are the 5 canons of rhetoric. And this is how you get your ideas across to people. This is how you persuade people to come round to your point of view, if that's your prerogative. This is how you sell stuff, right? So, think about this. Rhetoric is the difference between getting a job and not getting a job, right? If you can choose the right words to say, and you can deliver your information in an effective way at a job interview, then you get the job. Rhetoric. In fact, I'd say the whole trivium, really, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. This mastery of language it's the difference between a successful date and an unsuccessful date, for example. So really, it's a very powerful skill to develop. You will walk into a better life for yourself if you have skills with language. Maybe I didn't put that very skillfully, but you will walk into a better life with a strong understanding of the trivium. Maybe I'll put it that way. Okay, so moving on to the next thing about rhetoric. Part of rhetoric is persuasion, and we have these three persuasive techniques. You've got ethos, logos, and pathos, or maybe it's pathos. And I would suggest that if you are putting on any kind of speech, if you're addressing a group of people, to try and include a little bit of all three of these things in your speech, and to not be too heavy on one thing or another. So ethos is about credibility and ethics. And really, it's asking the question, like, who is this person who's talking? Why should I listen to them? Why do they know what they're talking about? Okay. In the last episode, I did a little bit of ethos. In a roundabout way, I told you that I'm a teacher and a head of department at a college and stuff. So that's a bit of ethos there. All right. I'm not, and it kind of reassures the listener, okay, this isn't just some random guy like that, there's a bit of credibility there. Ethics as well, you might say something like, well, I've got a CRB check. That's a UK thing. But if you're going to work with children, you need to have a clean criminal record. You have no criminal record, basically. So that's all part of ethos. Then we've got logos, which refers to logic and reason. And this is a way of persuading someone to figure something out for themselves. That can be a lot more persuasive than just telling somebody how it is. All right. So, well, I won't give any examples of that. I think I've been doing that a fair bit in this episode. And then the last thing here, the last persuasive technique, is pathos. And this is an appeal to emotion rather than an appeal to reason. And this is something that some people struggle with, particularly people on the kind of autistic side of the spectrum, because for those people, all they really care about is logos and a bit of ethos. The pathos doesn't really matter to them, right? All that really matters is like, who are you and what have you figured out, right? All the pathos stuff is like, when people say, oh, we'll do it for the kids, think about the kids, for the kids, it's not really an argument, and there's nothing really ethical about it. It doesn't give me any more credibility. It's all just something that I would say to sort of make you feel bad if you don't do it, and make you feel good if you do it. There are so many examples of pathos in the modern world, but I'm a little afraid to mention the things that are on my mind right now. So I might come up with some other examples later as to how pathos is used to persuade people. Interestingly, Aristotle said that when giving a speech, really the only thing that matters is time and place. And he said that time and place trumps all of these persuasive techniques. So, and he saw a lot of speeches in his time. He probably saw amazing speeches delivered to deaf ears, and then he probably also saw really clumsily put unpersuasive recitals like delivered to crowds that got an amazing reaction. So actually, timing, time and place, who are you talking to and at what time, is probably more important than applying these. Okay, so that's the trivium. Next time we will take a look at the quadrivium and what it is and why I love it. I'm going to just go back to these references again. So if you're interested in learning more about the trivium, I really recommend the Wooden Books Trivium, the classical liberal arts of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. I've got a reference for you here. So, yeah, if you have anything to say about any of this stuff, then leave a comment. Please be nice to each other in the comments section. That's a request that I'm going to make of you. And hopefully you will continue to study and develop yourself, work on your own personal development. If you've made it this far, then thank you for going on this journey with me. May it continue. Okay, well, be well and take care.